Hi, and welcome to Random Fandom FC, the podcast where I meet a new fan each week and explore how they came to support their team, what's been their highest high, their lowest low, and anything else I should know. Then we'll look ahead to their next game, and I'll check in next week to see how they got on, to see if we're a blessing or a curse when we follow along with the teams. My name's Rob. I'm an Arsenal fan living in the middle of Connecticut in the US, and I'll be your host. So let's get on and find out who we have this week. So as the crowd chants, who are you? Who are you? And who do you support?
I'm Mike, and I support the mighty Aston Villa.
Well, Mike, we have to do full disclosure to the listeners here. Mike and I have been coaches. We both have daughters that play this wonderful sport, and we met each other a few years ago as we were joint coaches on a team. So I am intrigued to know and explore into the fact that that's not a Birmingham accent. So we're going to explore into how you got into supporting Villa. But first, I've got a little bit of housekeeping from last week. We had Tony on, who was a Manchester United fan, and they were playing Fulham. He predicted that they were going to draw 2-2. I went for a 2-1 United win. Got to be honest, it wasn't the greatest spectacle in the world. It's 90 minutes of my life I'm not going to get back. Sorry, United fans, but they'll be happy because they won 1-0. Fulham were the best side. Classic tale of creating the chances but not being clinical and then getting punished down the other end when Martinez's strike took a huge deflection that turned it into a worldie of a finish from outside the area. I think that was their first shot on target in the game. And then at the end, Toby Collier pulled off a great goal line clearance to keep Joachim Anderson's header out. And Amad Diallo thought he'd gone and made it 2-0 to United, only for VAR to be the goal disallowing Grinches that they are. They drew their lines and he was offside. So that now makes it one team I followed and lost, which was Hereford. One team I followed and won, United. So no pressure, Mike, but Villa could maybe sway this one way or the other. So tell me, how did you, a man from this side of the pond, end up finding Aston Villa?
Well, in 1997, 1998, I was a postgraduate student at the University of Birmingham in England. And, you know, the moment you arrive in England, it's only a matter of time before someone asks you whether you play or watch football. It's inevitable. And you know, when you go to an English university, what I didn't realize is that you can play a five-a-side game in almost every day. Players book pitches, and it's fantastic. It's not it's totally free bookings, and it turns out our department had a team. And of course, they asked me, "Are you any good?" I said, "Well, no. I played soccer as a kid. I haven't kicked the ball since the freshman year of high school, but I love to play. Let's go." And as a mediocre soccer player who enjoys an occasional pint at the pub, I think I've just described half the male population of England. So you're always, you're going to get along well, aren't you? And and so that's how I got back into not only watching football but also playing it. And in terms of watching it again, apart from seeing some Liverpool games in the late 1970s on some arcane television channel in the United States that probably showed like a knitting show afterwards. It was just not part of American culture, certainly in the 1970s. So I had really no team to support. And fortunately, one of my classmates was Dan Huff, who is not only is just a top guy, but he's a football encyclopedia. And he made sure I had the full English football experience, because not only did he take me to Villa Park, but he also took me to Shrewsbury Town. So I got the big stadium football, and also the League Two, where someone's going to kick the ball out of the stadium and it lands in a river, and then there's some guy with a rowboat that gets the soccer ball, and it's just fantastic, and so we went to see Liverpool, and this is when Aston Villa was, fifth, sixth in the league. We had Stan Collymore, we had Ian Wright, we had, of course, Gareth Southgate, and this was just an exciting time to be, to support Aston Villa. And we beat Liverpool 2-1. And then, as I had showed you yesterday, we got into two UEFA Cup games that Villa was involved in, Atletico Bilbao and Atletico Madrid, and just exciting stuff. I think we in Madrid we had it was a 0-0 draw, and then there was an away goal early in the game at Villa Park, and we needed three to come back and win the tie. And we scored twice in the 73rd, 74th minute. Stan Collymore with a massive strike, and just to be in that stadium for that goal, I mean, it was absolute pandemonium.
Yeah,
And it
were
was
you? That's the word you used on the text message you sent me last night. When you sent me the clip of Collymore, he cuts in on his right foot and he just curls a beauty into the top corner. I think I vaguely remember that goal, but like I was asking Tony last week when he was describing being in the stadium, what's it like? Can you still close your eyes and see that moment as Collymore curls it into the net? What's you say pandemonium? Take us into the stadium for a minute. What was it like in there when you were watching that?
Well, it had already sort of started building a little bit after the first goal, because suddenly there's some sort of hope, right? When it's 1-0, you're sort of, you're still waiting for something to be excited about. And once Ian Wright had scored the goal, there was a little bit more of a buzz. And then, but when that ball hit the back of the net, it was a stadium experience that I hadn't had in the United States. Certainly, I mean, I'd been to some professional baseball games, but certainly nothing in the playoffs. And again, the UEFA Cup was Europe at that point. I mean, there wasn't nothing else. So this was like, the Champions League at the time. And that's something I appreciate more now than I did then, just having been, hey, I'm at a football stadium watching this great game. And you certainly appreciate it. You certainly appreciate it when your team's relegated. But
We'll come to that.
Yeah, unfortunately we will. But it was the atmosphere, and everybody was so into it. And that's the one thing that once you come back to the United States, it's really not the same kind of atmosphere. And I'm sure you know this from coming to the U.S. yourself. It's not the same environment where people are talking about it and living it and going to the stadium all the time. And
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to, like I said, to have Dan say, "Hey, Mike, we got to go, and you really want to see this stuff." And to see that kind of game, and again to see your team. Aston Villa didn't win that game, or they did win the game, but they didn't win the tie because they didn't score that third goal. But to see your team fight and give it your all for the last 15, 20 minutes of the game, it was just fantastic.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like when I moved here, it was more difficult. Been lucky to find a couple of pubs that kind of, probably because there's a lot of expats in there, but kind of rekindle that ability to just go in, have a pint, and talk football for however long you want to. So you can seek it out, but it's not there on every single street corner like it is in the UK. I do want to just point out one other thing. You sent me a picture of your ticket to that Bilbao game, and I still can't get over the fact that the ticket was £14.
Yeah, and Dan had gotten the ticket, and I don't know how difficult it was for him to get. I don't recall it being, I don't recall him sleeping out at night to get it, or something like that. So I can't imagine. I don't know what it would cost today, but I don't even want to. I know it's not anywhere close to 14 quid, and it's certainly three figures at least, right? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, it is just phenomenal to compare. You know, although it starts to make you feel old when you can look back at things like this. But the ease of being able to go to a stadium, maybe just waking up on a Saturday and think, "Oh, I'm going to go and watch a game today," and like being able to go versus these days where when we went back to the UK for Christmas, I was going to try and take my boys along to watch Arsenal Ipswich on the I think it was the day after Boxing Day. But it's just like finding unicorn crap, right? It just it's so hard to find, and if you want it, you've either got to go down the tout route or you've got to go and pay some kind of corporate hospitality fee and like remortgage your house to go watch it. So it's a shame. It on one hand, it's great that the game's grown like this and it's huge and it's global and it's amazing. The downside is that kind of it's just so difficult to go and watch one of the top flight games now. But okay, so you set the scene. That's how you got into it. So how long were you in Birmingham for?
like a year and a half. I didn't stay in the program, so around May '98, I think I came back.
Wow. So literally just a small amount of time was enough for the Villa bug to just have completely infused you. And how hard did you? Because now with NBC showing all the games, it's pretty easy. Like you can wake up on a Saturday and just like watch every game all the way through. But what was the coverage like then when you came back to the US back then?
Well, zero. I mean, '97, '98. I mean, again, sort of life intrudes, and I wasn't able to follow it for a while. But practically speaking, I don't know if I really could have watched it anyway in any way. And I don't even think they had Villa TV at that time. So it was just sort of, and again, as we were talking about, there's certainly more an atmosphere around the Premier League in the U.S. now. But '97, '98, I mean, who's like I said, the problem is it's not on.
Yeah.
So you loosely follow it. You check you check the standings and certainly when it came back on TV, and I can't remember when this was, maybe 2015. I'm like, oh, all right, this is great. I can get back and watch the games, and of course, unfortunately, that didn't coincide with the best football I've seen Villa play. But suddenly again, now it was something that you can watch, and I think even I'm sure for even Arsenal fans and Liverpool fans, it's like, oh, great, this is on TV now. And I know Villa TV was an option then, but it was, I heard the coverage was spotty. It was kind of expensive, and it would cut out every now and then. So it wasn't something that I had thought about getting. But certainly when it's on NBC, it's fantastic. And
Yeah.
so that's when I really started getting back into it.
I was so glad that it wasn't long after I moved here that NBC picked it up. And just like the bizarre thing now is I can actually consume more Saturday football than I could back home, because none of the 3 o'clock games are on TV back home, because I think they kind of don't want everybody going to the pub to watch the games. Instead, they actually want people going to like the 3 o'clocks of their local teams. So
Right.
there's a kind of a media blackout unless you're kind of watching it online. Like the TVs, they're not showing it. They're either showing the early or the late Sky games. But yeah, just over here now, kind of get up. I can watch any game I want. I can watch all three in a row, and then it's still not lunchtime by the time it's finished, so I can not get into trouble with the wife, because we've still got time to go out and shop. So anyway, right, let's do this in reverse order so that we finish on a high. So we're going to do lowest low and highest high. So of your Villa fandom, what's been the lowest low to date?
I want to say that it was getting relegated, but I think that entire year of football until we got relegated, I mean, it's the anticipation of knowing that it's going to happen and watching the games, and you're just sort of betting how Villa will find a way to lose the game, and it's just like it was inevitable after a while, and then it became like, can we please get this over with? And I think that was the lowest low, because again, you like any team that gets relegated, am I going to lose my best players?
Yeah,
Am I going to ever find my way back to the Premier League? And you've seen teams yo-yo up and down, and again, and worse, at the time, you lose your TV coverage. How do I follow Villa again?
yeah,
They're not showing a lot of Premier League games, so when they did get relegated, you're back to the BBC text feed or whatever, and you're reacting to somebody's tweet or something because you have no idea what's going on. So that was kind of, that was probably the worst of it, is that how do I follow the team now that it's not on TV anymore?
yeah. That's a really good point, and it's got to be the unknown, because looking back over the years, there's some big teams that have got relegated, but have come straight back and have kind of maybe stayed there ever since. Or maybe, if, like you say, have yo-yoed. But there's been some big teams that have been victim of that "they're too big to go down" conversation, followed by getting relegated, and then followed by taking years before they've clawed their way back up again. And I think probably Nottingham Forest is a good example of that, because
Mhm.
for me, getting into it in the late 80s, Nottingham Forest were a staple of the top division, and for them, then when they got relegated, it just took them so long to get back. It is nice to see where they are now and what they're doing. Um, but anyway, okay, lowest low, the leading up to the killing me slowly descent into relegation. Highest high through your fandom.
I think probably getting into the Champions League. And I mean, you could pick, for example, getting back into the Premier League, and that's certainly a high. I think the Champions League, not only because one, it was an unexpected, two, and also it's given us a little bit more of a financial cushion. I think we've made so far in the Champions League over 42 million pounds, just to get to where we are now. And, I mean, Villa is not a team like Arsenal and Liverpool and Man City with all these, vast revenue streams. So it's not only the excitement of being in the Champions League, but it's also, that little bit of financial breathing room that it gives you, that certainly you appreciate. And it certainly is something you appreciate more once your team is relegated. When we came back up, for years, West Ham was sort of your classic mid-table team, right? I mean, you could always count on West Ham being, somewhere and smack right dab in the middle of the table. And, you come back up as a Villa fan, you're like, geez, wish we were West Ham, I wouldn't mind just relaxing and not having to worry about relegation every week. So when you go all the way to the Champions League, you're like, all right, we could breathe a little bit as a team. No, we're not Arsenal and Liverpool or all these other teams yet, but we now have a whole big cushion of money that other teams would die to have. So I think that would probably be the highest.
Yeah, and I mean, you did it in style as well. It's not like you've kind of squeaked through and have got to go through the knockout round. Like some big teams. I was a bit of a skeptic for the new Champions League format, if I'm honest. When I saw the new layout and all this kind of stuff, I was like, oh, okay, this is all just a money grab and it's not going to be that good. But I'm a little bit of a convert, I think. It's the fact that the big teams actually have to play a couple of decent big teams as well. There's not just the kind of the gimmies where they just almost sleepwalk their way through the group stage and make it to the knockouts. There's not this safety net of, oh, well, even if you lose, you can parachute through to the Europa Cup, because that just feels like that sort of diluted that one. So I like the format, and you guys absolutely blitzed it. Like, whatever you have got, I think, the winner of was it Club Brugge or Atalanta or Sporting or Dortmund. So not the worst you could have had. You've had an absolutely epic Champions League campaign so far.
Yeah, and again, I mentioned this in my text earlier. You got to keep your perspective as a team. If we bounce out in the next round, well, we bounce out. You have to ask yourself at the beginning of the year, where did you expect to be in the Champions League? We hope to make the knockout rounds, to be honest, didn't we? I think if any Villa fans honest with you, they're going to say, yeah, we'll be happy, if we make the knockout rounds. But to keep yourself in check, because you get disappointed fairly easily watching your football team. And certainly in Villa's case, we have a history of being disappointed. And you just have to remind yourself is that, look, back then we were happy to make the knockouts. So, yes, we've made it now a guaranteed 9.3 million just by avoiding the knockouts, plus the rest it gives us for the games we have in the Premier League. And if you're not happy with that, well, then you're going to be hard to be happy as a Villa fan, because we're not Liverpool, we're not Arsenal.
When you mentioned that, like the revenue streams, I mean, obviously the news had just broken yesterday or day before that you've cashed in on one of your strikers. So was it Duran's gone for, is it 77 million or something like that?
Yeah.
Which is a huge amount of money, and you're really, really close. Although Emery wouldn't be drawn into it on the TV today about the Rashford deal with the kind of loan to buy. Where do you stand on kind of that? The business side of taking the money. I guess Duran probably made it that he didn't want to stay. He wanted to be first choice, and he wasn't going to be because of Watkins. So you got that aspect. And where do you stand on kind of Rashford as being the replacement?
Yeah. Ideally, you'd like to keep Duran and Watkins for the rest of the year because of the schedule we have and the talent that Duran, has shown. But look, he's a risk. He's got a maturity problem. I read between the lines of Emery's comments that I'm not sure he's taken everything on board that Emery says. I mean, Watkins is a complete striker. He's got everything. He's not just got goals, he's got assists as well. Does he have a big chances problem? Absolutely. I think he leads the league in big chances missed or something. But good grief, he does everything else. He does assists. He's a top professional. His character is fantastic. You love to have him on your team. And Duran is a risk. And if he wants to go, I mean, he's already said during the summers he gave the hammer sign when he is supposed to deal with West Ham. Like, do you want that in your locker room? Yes, he's young. Yes, he can mature, and hopefully he will as a player. But if he's going to have that risk and he wants to go, and you can get 77 million, goodbye. Now, if what's interesting is that if Arsenal had gone for Watkins earlier in the window, I think from a purely financial perspective, I take the risk on Duran and sell Watkins. Watkins is 29.
Yeah.
Villa, like I said, Villa isn't Liverpool. We still have to be a selling club. We sell high on Watkins now. He's had no significant injuries. Like I said, he's a consummate professional. He's a boy-hit Arsenal fan. I mean, the deal really would work, I think, for everybody, even though it would be a risk on Villa's point because of Duran's sort of mercurial personality, and you just don't know what you're going to get from him in the future. But I think Villa still has to be a club that takes that kind of risk, and I think that deal would have worked, and I might have been comfortable with that risk of staying with Duran. But with Rashford, again, I think I'm comfortable with a loan. I'm a little concerned when the manager says, he needs to, he's got sort of an attitude problem, according to Emerim. So I'm asking myself, yeah, I'll take him on a loan. I mean, obviously he's fantastically talented. I mean, I'm not worried about the footballing part of it per se, or the potential footballing of it. But if he's not giving 100%, do you want that on your team long term? And I'm saying no. I'll certainly take him for a loan because, well, who else? It's January. So I think it makes sense as a deal for a loan, maybe a loan to buy. But again, I'm kind of treading carefully because, you don't want to have – Villa has a great locker room. I mean, you can't complain about Villa's players and their attitude and their commitment. And do you want to mess that up? So that's something to think about before you say, yeah, let's buy Marcus Rashford. He's an English international, and he's fantastically talented. He can put the ball in the net. All those things are true, but is that what you're getting right now? And
I always wonder about those types of things as to, is it just he hasn't seemed to fit the plans of the last couple of managers. He was on the periphery of Ten Hag. Amorim doesn't seem to fancy him now. Is it because the ultimate formation that Amorim wants to play and he can't see a way of getting Rashford into that, or there are other players that he would have ahead of Rashford in that, and Rashford can see the writings on the wall, so therefore he's not putting in as much effort, and he's almost. I sometimes think that players start to down tools in a little bit to try to force the move. To your point, there's the risk there, because is that a short-term tactic just to get out and then get a fresh start somewhere else, and when he lands somewhere else, he'll be to Mr. Fantastic and be an amazing player both on the pitch and in the dressing room? Or is there that little bit of attitude, like you say, that there's that risk there? So I agree. I think a loan makes perfect sense. Try before you buy, as they say.
Yeah, and I think the good news in Villa is that Villa has a lot going for it right now in terms of having great owners, with a great business sense, a great business plan. They have a manager that can develop players. That they've wisely improved their youth training facilities. In other words, we've kind of built ourselves as a team as, look, we're gonna follow kind of the Brighton model. We're gonna take these young talented players, develop them, and either play them or loan them or sell them. And I think Villa, this is where you have to not get ahead of yourself as a team. Yeah, we're Champions League. Let's keep Ollie Watkins till he's 35. Careful, because you're not there yet. you still have to you still have to take the risks that Brighton does, and you have to accept the fact that some of these risks aren't going to play out. And do you,
100%.
the issue is do you trust the team that Villa has put together? And I think the answer so far is absolutely yes. I mean, Emery's been great. The owners have done sensible things. They took a big risk of getting when they got rid of Gerrard, and brought in Emery, and not everybody was on board with that. But the owner says, nope, we're not progressing fast enough. We need a manager, and we were fortunate enough to get. And this is the other thing about a mid-table team. We were fortunate to get Emery. And sometimes as a mid-table team, you're not offered the best managers. You're not always going to get that. So Villa has made a lot of the opportunities that it's been presented with.
Yeah, agree. And I think you're absolutely right in what you say about not overextending Champions League. There's a famous example of Leeds United that when got to the Champions League, a bit like you did, kind of maybe ahead of when they were expecting to, and went all in and spent all this money on super huge wages. And then it all fell apart and they got relegated. And because they didn't see it coming, if I remember correctly, they didn't have things like clauses of reducing people's salary when they got relegated. And they spiraled and took a long time to come back from that. So just because you make the Champions League, I don't think you can suddenly start thinking of yourselves as Real Madrid and dining out at the top table and hey, let's go and buy whoever, let's go and do Villa Galacticos. It's very
Yeah.
common sense approach what Villa are doing right now, and I think it's kind of setting them up well for the future. And I think I said last week, maybe to Tony when we were talking about like end of empires for long managers, like with Manchester United having Sir Alex Ferguson, Arsenal having Wenger. I said that Emery was right man, wrong time for Arsenal. I think he's a very, very good manager. I just think anybody coming in after the Wenger era was probably taking a poison chalice role. So I don't know that he got a fair crack at Arsenal. So no, I really rate him, and I think he's doing great things with Villa.
Can
Still
I ask
stings a
you a
little.
question?
Go for it.
Can I ask you a question? When we talked a few years ago, we talked about what a great season Arsenal is having, and I'm like, "Do you think you can win the title?" And you said to me, you said, well, "I just hope we make Champions League." And now it's a few years later. Are your expectations different now? Do you see yourself as Arsenal having this window now of a narrow window to win the league? And do you go for someone like Ollie Watkins as let's go for it now kind of mentality?
Well, I'm going to let you ask this question. This is supposed to be Villa related, but I'll answer that for you, even as you ask. So, I always thought it had to be progress. As I said to Tony last week, sometimes teams just need ripping down, starting all over again. And Man United in their little manager merry-go-round, I don't think have ever done that. They've always just allowed a kind of a squad that's kind of falling apart to kept being picked up by the next guy, then he doesn't make magic tricks out of that and he gets fired and so on and so forth. What they did with Arteta was they just said, right, you're going to have time to rebuild this thing. Just make this thing look like Arsenal again. Uh, go with the kids, bring in some talent, just get us up fighting again. And I always said to you that as long as I see progress each year, and every year Arteta has managed to get more points than he did the season before. And yeah, now I'm kind of going where I used to be thinking, oh, will we qualify for, can we get sixth or seventh and get into the Europa? Now I'm almost thinking, well, we should be back to challenging for top four every year. But actually, with a couple of good investments, we're at a title shot each year. And we've been bridesmaids the last couple of seasons, and people like, oh, Arsenal have bottled it. I will take bottling the title every year if it means being involved in a challenge for the title. Because those years after having the glory days of Wenger and then having almost like a decade of just not even being close, I'd rather be up there in the fight and then fall
Yeah.
short. And I know it's crushing when you fall short than just not even being in the conversation.
So do you take Ollie Watkins, loan, buy?
I take Ollie Watkins right now. We are missing. We don't have an out and out striker anymore. Havertz, Jesus, all those players, they like to drop back and sit alongside Odegaard and kind of be the false 9, 10, whatever they call it these days. We just don't have that guy, center of the field, who the only thought on his mind is to shoot and score. If we had a Watkins in there, the problem is we're in an era right now where there aren't a million great strikers around, and the ones that are hugely cherished by their teams. So you're not going to go and get a top striker off another club. And the only leverage you've got, I think, like you just said, is that Villa are doing good business sense at the moment. Watkins is 29. He's not your future. he wouldn't be ours, but he would potentially solve a problem we have right now of not putting
Right.
the ball in the net as often as we'd like. So. Okay, right. We have to look ahead to next week now. Now, you've just come off the back. I said I wasn't going to mention it, but I'm going to have to mention it. You've just come off the back of a rather disappointing loss to Wolves, so we're probably good that you didn't come on earlier and we were previewing that one. So the next game up for you is actually the FA Cup. It's Aston Villa Spurs next week, I think. Um, as a quick question for you, as an American, I find that any of the buddies I talk to over here can't get their head around the whole idea of the FA Cup and this just random drawing together of Davids and Goliaths. And did you have a soft spot for the FA Cup?
Would I ever what?
Do you have a soft spot for the FA Cup? Do you? I'm very
Yeah,
romantic about it. I love it as a tournament. I
it's
absolutely love it.
it's fantastic. It's absolutely now. It should happen. I think there's too many of the cups, to be honest with you. I think they should. I don't know. Part of me says get rid of the EFL Cup and stay with the FA Cup, but still, I think you need a format where you can get the random Division Two team that sort of sweeps through, and you never want it to be your team. And it has been Aston Villa that's gone out to some of these teams. I think the year we got relegated, I think we lost to Stevenage or somebody like that. But it's great for the game. It's great for those clubs. I mean, even purely for revenue. People underestimate how much importance that has for those teams just for and I think it's good for the game. No, it's absolutely fantastic stuff.
So you've had a disappointing run, although we can probably put today's down to, I think they said that's something like the last 7 games you've played following a European week, you've either lost or failed to win 7 on a row. So let's put that down to post-European hangover. Next week, playing against a struggling Tottenham team that have got about 3,000 injuries. Although some of them might be coming back. How are you feeling against the Villa Tottenham? So I'm going to make you do a prediction here.
Are we away? I can't remember. Are we
No,
home?
you're at home. You're at home.
Home against Tottenham. I'm gonna go for a 2-1 win. 2-1 Villa.
Ooh, 2-1 Villa marching on in the cup. Yeah, because I mean, Tottenham are an absolute flip of a coin team at the moment. They can go and beat. Oh, what was it the other week? They can go to City and beat them 4-0 and just look like
Yeah.
the greatest team on earth. And then they can go 1 goal up against Leicester last week and then just completely blow it in the first 3 minutes of the second half. They are total Jekyll and Hyde. So I really do think I would probably back Villa as well. It is the cup. Um, I'm going to go for a really tight 1-0 win to Villa. I agree with you. I think Villa are going to win this. I just think they'll bounce back from this one. Emery will get them, kind of cajole them around and focus them down. I just don't know that Tottenham are going to have the strength and depth that their first team has come back.
I
So
think it'll be an open game, don't you think? Though,
I would just say that if Watkins didn't get injured today, because I'm not sure if he did come off injured or not, but he's going to have a world of space to operate in because of how high those fullbacks like to play in Ange's formation at Spurs. I've never seen a team defend so high up the field and just go. They're Kevin Keegan's Newcastle from the late 90s. We're just going to score more than you. That's the mentality. But then when it doesn't work spectacularly. So my brother-in-law is a big Spurs fan, and he's now joined the Ange out bus where he just can't take any more of this, not knowing what's coming next.
yeah, you look at their goal difference, and you're like, where how did they get to where they are on the table? And I think Villa's the same way. Like I said, it could be a 3-0 Spurs drubbing too. I mean, it's hard to say. But again, it's the price you pay when you play in the Champions League, and again, injuries again affect everybody, so you don't really know what's going to happen. But looking forward to looking forward mostly to that Champions League tie, that next champion.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Mike, and talking about Aston Villa.
Always a pleasure.
Anybody out there that wants to come on and do this for their team, then just either visit our social site we're on Twitter or X these days, Threads and Blue Sky, or just drop an email into randomfandomfc@gmail.com and tell me who you support, and we will try to get you on and hear your backstory. So, yeah, thanks again, Mike. Really great having you on.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rob.